We are going to be kickstarting the masterclass for today, and today's masterclass is going to be spearheaded by Venky Hariharan, a human-centered designer, a design manager with Onething Design Studios. Venky has been leading strategy ideation across multiple projects, products, and particularly the entire execution on user research has been the forte. User research, design strategy, workflow creation, information architecture, usability testing. So basically, overall managing the design, the delivery for projects, has been dealing with clients like Noise, like Hindustan Unilever, ITC, RBL Bank. Past clients include PVR Cinemas, Swiggy. Had done his engineering and post that did the masters in integrated digital media from the New York University, and 8 years ago kickstarted this entire so-called foray into the user experience domain. Venky, I'll let you spearhead the entire conversation. Looking forward to the masterclass. Over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. As Neerja mentioned, I am a UX designer first and foremost. I was initially an engineer for a couple of years. Like I studied engineering, then worked in the field for about a year and a half before I decided to do something else, and found myself doing design while at NYU for my master's. So what we'll be doing today is we'll be sort of dissecting this product that we had created during COVID. In fact, 2020 is when we started working on this. It's called Lokal. It is a news and classified app for tier 2, tier 3 cities. Now, the problem statement here is, of course, that, how might we create an app that provides, how might we create a platform that provides information in a localized fashion? That is to say that, specifically for this app, for example, there are a lot of news apps present in the world, but they talk about pretty much everything in the world, right? Now, for a localized news app, it's important to remember that someone who lives in a smaller town like Anantapuram doesn't really care who the president of France is. They want to know whether the road outside their shop that they own is going to get fixed anytime soon. It's all about local news, local weather, all about what you can find in and around your city, and that's more important to people from that area. Whatever is happening immediately around them, it affects their livelihoods. So we had to build something that could provide appropriate information for them. So for this, we obviously, Lokal was a pre-existing app and it was already being used by millions of users. So our first challenge was to ensure that we don't alienate users by completely overhauling it. Our second challenge was removing some of the entrenched biases that we might have regarding tier 2, tier 3 cities. The biggest one that we had was the fact that tier 2, tier 3 cities were not as digitally forward as tier 1 and metro cities, which turned out to be completely false right from the get-go. Which is to say that we found out that people from tier 2, tier 3 cities are actually very tech savvy, and they're in fact considered the next billion users, which is to say that these are the people who will be leading, the next frontier of tech. Right. And not in terms of new technology, in terms of technology that is pre-existing and making it more usable across the board. So to begin with, I'm just going to share my screen and take you through a couple of things. What I'll do is there was, of course, a ton of research done for this. In fact, spent about 2 months just doing research. So I'll just, give you like the cliff notes for this. I'll just quickly take you through what the research was, how we changed things around, and how we kept some things, who we spoke to, and things like that. Right. So to begin with, I want to share with you what we do from the get-go, which is some competitive analysis. Right. So it's important to remember when you're designing for local audiences, not local the app, but for audiences that are localized to a certain type of ethnography or ethnicity or even a region. It's important to take into account that you will not get close competitors all that much, right? Even the closest competitor would be catering to a different thing altogether. So what you have to do is sort of extrapolate the information you have and build on the baselines that you want to set. So the baselines that we set for this was the visual language, brand aesthetics, information architecture, and overall experience, right? So we looked at 4 competitor apps: Daily Hunt, Public, Circle, Share Chat, Way to News, and Public Vibe was more of an analogous experience that we had picked up. So for Daily Hunt, this was, I'll just take it through one of them because otherwise it'll take a lot of time. So what we looked at for Daily Hunt is first and foremost the visual language and the brand aesthetics. Now, why did we start with visual language? It's important to note that, for an app that is providing heavy information, in this case, a news app, right? It's important to sort of, understand how they're visually representing it. What is the architecture, the hierarchy of information that is being presented to the users for an app like this? That's mostly because, of course, when you already have so much input happening, how do you ensure that the user knows what is important, knows what they have to look at, and knows where they have to go next? So these 3 things have to be kept in mind, right? So which is why we looked at the visual language. Overall, we figured that the app has a light interface, light color palette. However, it sort of blends into the background, and one thing blends into the other thing. So it's, there is not enough demarcation happening in that sense for your Daily Hunt. So that is something that we took away as something that we'll have to do differently. Then we looked at the information architecture. Now, for a lot of these local language apps, you will notice that they try to be super apps, and with reason, with good reason. They try and provide you with all sorts of information. Not only is it news about whatever is happening nearby, it's about politics, it's about weather, sports, and local sports as well. For states like Punjab, Haryana, for example, the district level sports is just as important as the international scene, right? And it's not just cricket. For places like Punjab, Haryana, even out east, you have football, hockey, a lot of different sort of sports that they play and they indulge in, and all that information is important to them. They follow that quite closely, right? And more over and above that, you have news about obviously crime. And we were building this during COVID time, so of course COVID had its own little feature section going on and things like that. So you can actually see that there's like a ton of different things that they're trying to do over here, right? But it's important to remember that although users might not enjoy a massive change in the overall navigation, it's important to also remember that they might need it, they might not want it, but if you do it in the right manner, it doesn't really impact the app usage all that much, right? So that's what we're looking at over here, that the overall IA is actually a lot. And this is the current IA, and these are all the different sections that you can add. You can add separate news channels as well. As you can see, this is News 18. Then the app features we saw, in terms of how does the app onboard users, how does the app let the user create profiles, what personalization features does it have, how does it try to reduce cognitive load? That's important. Cognitive load and visual load for informational apps is very important to take a look at, as are the other loads, of course, but these two are kind of at the forefront of that. How do they experience content? Is it pull content or push content? Things like that. So some of our takeaways from that was the fact that, simple actions of filtering through the news, filtering through similar content, those need to be, kept at the forefront through a degree of personalization. Then being able to access different categories the way that the users want to access them is also important, although not primary. Then we saw like a lot of these apps, this one, Daily Hunt and Public, all of them sort of have like a an ongoing scroll, but they don't necessarily have it demarcated. So we felt that there needs to be information that is demarcated according to cards, like a card format, which you've seen in like the Google cards. If you go to your Google search app, or even like Facebook was doing it for a bit, where everything was demarcated in a nice little square. So that allows the user to sort of focus on, what they are looking at in that moment, and looking at that information and only that information. And it also helps you as a designer to segregate the information in a way that, ensures that you are not overthinking it, and you're able to provide primary information correctly, right? And then finally, what we saw across the board was there was a search bar provided for exploring, trending news or any top category and things like that. So now this is what we did across all these 4 apps. You'll see like the overall way that we've gone about the comparative analysis for local remains the same. And the key takeaways more or less also, remain the same, just that certain people have done certain things well, like public has good iconography, right? That's important. Iconography, especially for lower tier cities, is important along with a label. Now that's true for all products, but especially true when you're dealing with local languages, because you might not, you might not have enough context for what, for example, when they say that, like for example, the save icon, right? You will see it's different now in Google Drive, for example. In Google Drive, there's a little arrow in a box. It just says save, but we are used to a floppy disk. As a people, we remember floppy disk as the save icon. So the same context might not be there for different iconographies. However, you can never go wrong with an icon and a label together. Now, based on all of this, all of the comparative analysis that we did, we went on to sort of parallelly, we were also interviewing people. We were interviewing people to create personas, right? I'll just take you through a quick session of interview, because it was an interesting problem to solve for interview, because we could not interview people who were not locally present there. People whose first language is the language that you were building this app in, which is Telugu. Now, the problem, of course, is that none of us actually knew Telugu, which meant, as you will see right now,
మీకు అది చూస్తుంటే అసలు ఏమనిపిస్తుందండి, లైక్ ఆ హోమ్ పేజ్ అంటే లోకల్ యాప్ లోనే హోమ్ పేజ్. ఓకే ఓకే ఓకే
Okay, so what does she call the homepage for local app?
ఓకే మేడం, మీరు హోమ్ పేజ్ అంటే మరి మొబైల్ లోకి వెళ్ళారు కదా, మీరు నార్మల్ గా హోమ్ పేజ్ అంటే ఏమనుకుంటారండి మరి లోకల్ యాప్ లో? లోకల్ యాప్ లో హోమ్ పేజ్ అంటే ఇందులో స్టార్టింగ్ అన్నిటికి గురించి ఉంటుంది కదండి, పైన ప్రతి విషయం గురించి ఉంటుంది కదా, అది హోమ్ పేజ్. So she's saying that home page is like every news is like featured over here. Updates ఉంటాయి కదండి, updates and everything. Yeah.
So she does call this section the home page. What does she call this section?
మేడం, మేము మరి ఈ హోమ్ పేజ్ ని ఏమని అంటారు నార్మల్ గా? మీరు హోమ్ పేజ్ అంటే మొబైల్.
Ask her what she calls. Don't say home page. Ask her what she calls this section that she's on.
ఓకే మేడం, ఈ సెక్షన్ ఉంది కదా, మీకు నార్మల్ గా అన్ని వస్తాయని చెప్తున్నారు కదా, ఈ సెక్షన్ మీరు ఏమని అంటారు? అర్థం కాలేదు, చెప్పండి, వినిపించలేదు. అంటే మీరు ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ అన్ని వస్తాయి, అప్డేట్స్ అన్ని వస్తాయని చెప్తున్నారు కదా, మీరు ఈ సెక్షన్ ని ఏమని అంటారు నార్మల్ గా? ఏమని పిలుస్తారు? హోమ్ పేజ్ అంటే స్టార్టింగ్ ఫస్ట్ వస్తుంది కదా, లోకల్ చూపిస్తానండి, మొబైల్ అనే లోకల్ ముఖ్యం అలా.
That's fine. Okay, so what? So as you can tell here, our first problem was the language barrier. And I don't know if you could make out from this, but we had a translator sort of speak to the person at the other end. So now the problem with that is that, again, it's the problem of context, which is to say that, as you saw, like I had to explain to them that don't say the word homepage, because obviously when you say it, you've set that context to the user, and then they will repeat it back to you, right? So it's very important during user interviews to ask the right questions. But the problem is, when you're not the person asking it, you have to set context for somebody else to ask it exactly how you would ask it, right? And the translator who ended up working with us throughout this project had to be taught that, and obviously eventually she got it, and it became like a very an easier interaction with her in the middle. But that was our first problem, the fact that we had to overcome a language barriers. The second thing we had to overcome was the technology barrier, because we were calling into places that might not support 4G all that well. It's a lot more prevalent now than it was even 2 years ago, believe it or not. But back then, so as you can see, this person is sharing her screen, which that alone is enough for us to sort of let go of the bias that we had initially. If someone knows how to share their screen over a Google Meet, then clearly they know how technology runs, right? So that helped us sort of understand a lot of these things that we wanted to know about how technologically savvy these people are. As you can tell here, it says consolidated user interview report. So we took back quite a few interesting ideas from there, right? That most of the users are moderately or highly active on mobile application, and specifically this application. Some of the users are new to the world of the internet. Others had been using smartphones and internet for about 3 to 9 years. Majority of the users explored the app prominently, and approximately half the users we interviewed have been using the application for other features as well, right? So a lot of things in terms of the biases, in terms of the key takeaways were taken from here. But this is just a 5-page document, but if you were to actually look at the amount of users we interviewed, it says 8 users here. It doesn't taken it up properly. But if I was to show you, it's about 28 pages of documentation that we had to go through. And each person was asked a set of questions about how long they've been using a cell phone, how did you find out about the app, what time do you use the app, what did you last use the app for. Again, as you can see, there are no yes or no questions. There are no questions about do you like this app, do you like how we've made this app. Nothing of that sort. Like, it's more about how are you using it, why are you using it, when do you use it, what do you do when you're using it, things like that. Just a lot of questions about the user's behavior, which is important here, right? And more so when it's a local language app, because again, you don't have context for that region. You don't have enough ethnographic research. And like I said, unfortunately, it was during COVID, during lockdown, so we couldn't even actually travel there and do this. So, if we had actually gone to a place like Anantapuram, we would have understood usage firsthand. Right now, mostly second-hand information that we were getting through a translator. Even though we were there, right there for the question answers, the answers coming were contextualized through someone else. So, a lot of these things we had to take care of, and we had to keep going back to validate already validated assumptions, right? Just to make sure that we had it right. Following this, we actually created the personas. We started off with what are known as assumed personas. Like, we just had a bunch of assumptions, we put them together, and then we validated them through our user interviews. So we came up with people like, Sumit Kodati, whose primary goal is to just browse and be up to date, who's new to the world of internet, spends a lot of time scrolling through content. Pain points are things like learning curve for the app is quite high and things like that, right? So we had to make sure that we cater to people like Mr. Sumit, Mr. Ramamurthy, Mr. Jagdish, all of these people. We had to ensure, that we are looking at key pain points for these guys, key points for behavioral traits and things like that. So again, like, you go in with an assumption about the person and then you validate through these user interviews. And as you saw, that's only phase 1 of the user interviews. Actually, we had 4 different phases throughout the creation of this app. Across 6 months, we must have interviewed about, I want to say, about 30 to 40 people almost across 4 phases. So that's a lot of people, right? And a lot of ensuring that we haven't done anything based on an assumption about somebody's lifestyle, or based on an assumption about somebody's technical know-how and things like that, right? Yeah, so moving on from there, in parallel to this, in fact, we had to do what is known as secondary research as well. Secondary research, for example, is things like, how do people navigate? Right now, I keep talking about navigation. The reason behind that is that although Lokal only had about like 5 main navigation elements, which is what you call the bottom bar, the bottom menu, right, which has like 5 different sections. Like, if you, for example, go to Instagram, you'll see, like, you have your homepage, search page, reels, shop, and profile, right? So those 4 things are there. So similar to that, Lokal also had, like, homepage, newsstand, a bunch of other things, right? But the issue was that within each within each section, there was a sub navigation bar which had about 10-15 elements. So, how do you combine that? How do you make sure that it comes down to an agreeable number? And an agreeable number, according to, UX laws, is between 5 and 7. Right. So because human beings have a tendency to remember 5 bits of information without having to recall them. Right. It's just if you look at something and there are 5 bits of information that make up the entire product, you will tend to remember that. So now how do you bring down about 15-20 sub navigation items to about 5 to 7 sub navigation items? So we had to go on and do a navigational analysis. How do people not only navigate in terms of across a product, but within each section of a product, how do they look at things, right? So we had to look at linear architecture, a link between, for example, over here, we saw how tier 2 and tier 3 populations and what kind of navigation do they find easier? Should we be using linear architecture? What is the current flow of the local app? How do we focus on this thing, making the navigation more usable? So we did a heuristic analysis for that. Then, how do we redesign the architecture? Now, this is just research. And as you can tell, this is about 15 pages worth of documentation where we've just written. There's no design here. This is all just documentation. And we've asked ourselves questions like, does age and gender make a difference? How do we use iconography? What would be better, a flat hierarchy or a deep hierarchy, which is to say that should we have it like this or should we have it like this? So how can we make this better, basically, is what we were looking at, right? And we did a heuristic evaluation of the navigation section only. You do a heuristic evaluation of the overall website as overall product as well. But over here, we decided we'll just look at the navigation and look at if we can see how the heuristic principles set by Nielsen Norman, how do they fit over here? So you have 10 principles, that is some things like visibility of system status, match between system and the real world, things like that. So, you look at all of this and then you figure out what needs to be redesigned, what can be, left as is, or what can be looked into further for research, things like that. Right. Yeah. So, we had to do all of this to understand the first step, which is building the information architecture. So once we've done the personas, once we've done the competitive analysis, heuristic evaluation, user interviews, user research, ethnographic research, all of that, we built the information architecture for this product. So as you can see, this is the current information architecture. For this was the then current information architecture for local. And under the headlines tab, you can see there are about that many sub navigation items, which is like the bottom navigation, you click on headlines, then the top navigation, you just keep scrolling horizontally to go through all of these. And it's the same for a lot of them, as you can see, right? So what we did was we decided to break things up and move some things together. And the best part about that is we got something that sort of is something that you can work with as a user, bits of information that you don't have to look into multiple times. So we broke it up into 2 sets of navigation. We have the bottom navigation, which is this one, which only has now local, newsstand, which we'll get to why we use that word, because when we were rebuilding this was called headlines. And this was called local still, right? Newsstand, local services, and search, right? Now, let's start with the bottom navigation bar first. So yeah, as you can tell, we've kept this the same. Only thing that's different is newsstand. Now, the thing was that the part that says headlines, people were scrolling to that as soon as they opened the app because they thought that is where the news is. Because, of course, if you call something headlines, you tend to think that that's the news that they're talking about. People weren't entirely certain why the news was divided into headlines and local, because they saw that there is news here as well. So they just assumed that this was just news about their local district, their city, their district, and just overall just the actual localized news. And they thought this was news about everything else, which is right. But the problem there was that if they were looking for a specific type of news, say they were looking about, updates for education and tech, but in their city, they would start searching here instead of over here. So that became problematic. People could never find what they want if they want to go even one layer deeper than just the news, right? And that's a problem for an app that wants to be more than just the news. So we changed this to newsstand, because in tier 2, tier 3 cities, this is still a concept. And for you younger people who don't really know what that's like, a newsstand you can actually still find at bus stops, etc., or train stations, where you will see a little shop that has different magazines, different types of like storybooks, or even the daily paper, things like that. So a newsstand used to collect all that physical content, right? So it rung a note with people. They understood what this was, because when we went back for user acceptance testing, which is what you do at the end of the design, they understood that this was for other media type of news, which is what we made this. And what we did was we combined a bunch of things. Like education and tech used to be different, right? They used to be two different sections. So now we made it together, right? Finances and business used to be two different sections. We put it under corporate. We've also used this term specifically because, locally speaking, corporate stood for more than just like work. It stood for like anything to do with a corporation, so to speak, which is to say like finances, businesses, how are they running, what to do, and things like that. All four of these used to be different. The running theme in them was that they were all nationalized news, because crime about local news, local crime was actually still under local news and district info. So that worked out for us. So we put crime, politics, and sports under national news, right? And again, localized sports, I'll just show you how that looks. It's something that we figured out, how we can have national sports here and where we can actually put local sports. So it worked out for us. Right. So this is just the information architecture. I'll just show you how that comes together. And everything else we sort of put over here. And to increase discoverability, what we did was, in the burger menu that we created, we put top categories and all categories in there, so that anytime, so the burger menu is what you see, the 3 lines menu up top on any product, on any app. So you click on that, something opens up from the site. So we put like top categories and all categories in there. So it made life easier for us, because now that's increased discoverability of the different categories that exist, right? And location is again on the top. There's just one icon. Instead of having to scroll to a different section, you just click on that icon. So things like that. I'll just show you how that all came together. So what we essentially did was basically put all that information together and ensured that it's demarcated in a way where it makes sense. And even the words that we have used, we had to use in a way that it could be translated to Tamil, Telugu, Hindi, and Kannada without changing the meaning across the board, right? We in fact had a funny little incident where under your user profile you can follow people, and so obviously your user profile shows how many people you're following and how many people are following you. So obviously the people you are following in Instagram, it says following, right? So we just use that. We put it into Google Translate and we just said following. We put that into Telugu. And what we didn't realize was that Google gives you so many different meanings for the same word, that we had actually accidentally, instead of just translating the word following into Telugu, we had translated following as next, as in, what is to follow, following this, So we accidentally had the word next in Telugu underneath a number, which made no sense to people. So, you have to keep doing this. You have to keep iterating. You have to keep asking people, tell us what this means. Tell us, what do you think this means? So, that's what I was doing over there. In fact, we had an initial set of calls with the users as well, where again, we had to sort of, ensure that. Okay, all right. Great. So, hi, Mr. Melankonda. Could you please let us know how long you've been using a smartphone? As you can tell, our other worst enemy was like low tech. You can barely hear what he's saying, but thankfully we had somebody who was a middle person who could sort of translate, who could hear me and then translate that, and then hear that person translate what I was saying. So it was a whole thing. So yeah, post creating the information architecture, now is when we actually put pen to paper, because now is when we've decided to create the feed section, right? So here we've sort of given them, this is again documentation that goes out to the client. We've sort of, put the entire feed over here, and then we've broken it up into different sections. We've sort of explained, okay, this is how does latest news show up, how does breaking news show up, how does discoverability show up. So as you can see, we have small discoverability cards, small quiz cards, things like that. You're keeping it fresh, and then you have certain different discoverability sections, like, for matrimony section, you created a banner like this. For a job section, we created a banner like this. So it's like, we're just trying to sort of play around with different types of cards and see how we can increase discoverability across the product in just the home page, which, like a lot of users, as we found out, were on the home page and they were not on it for too long. So we needed to provide them with an idea of what else is there in the app without it being overwhelming. We can't just dive into a bunch of information. It had to come in the middle somewhere, make it look good. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to rush through this. So yeah, so this was the wireframes that we had created. Yeah, this is how we solved the problem of sports. And look, so this was just a ticker that kept going at the bottom. This is the bottom navigation bar. This is the ticker. And we just made sure that, we create this in a way where you can tap on it and it'll actually open up a whole card like this, right? Where it'll show you like, election results, cricket scores, everything that you want to see. Finally, what this turned into is this. So this was the burger menu I was talking to you about, where it opens up on the site. This was the notification, your profile, your location tab, everything, right? These are the different sections that I had shown you earlier in the information architecture, right? So you have your latest news up top, you have your breaking news here, you have a ticker and a persistent navigation down here. This is to post news. This is, of course, the news is generated by people who are already on this app. So this is for them. So yeah, so, and then you have all your discoverability sections that I was talking to you about. So you see your job section, your matrimony section, breaking news, latest news, things like that. So we made it interesting. As you can tell, it's, demarcated, it increases discoverability. There's more things that you can see. So if there's a video news, then there is similar videos underneath that news, and an option to go to the videos section, which is under newsstand. So, again, like, trying to make sure that people move across the app through the homepage, So yeah, this is local. This is what we had built, like I said, for local languages where you see it in Telugu. This was another challenge, that we had to pick a font that wasn't too rounded, because Telugu is already such a rounded font that you don't want it, or you don't want the font to add an extra matra or something that you might accidentally add, right? So this is what we created. This is local. You guys can look it up. A lot of our designs has been what they have currently. They have changed in the last, I think 6 months or so, because they are still our clients. We're constantly working with them. So they had other requirements and we've changed a lot of things, but you can see a lot of the design on their app. If you have an Android, of course, this is not built for an iPhone. So yeah, that is it, guys. Thank you so much for paying attention. Nirja, we can move on to Q&A.
Yes, sure. We have a question in the Q&A section. Yes, Kevin, we will be, of course, posting it. So I think that shouldn't be an issue at all. We've got Samarth's question.
Right. Are there any internships provided right now? We're always looking for interns, and I'm sure this course will prepare you even better for an internship, be it at One Thing or anywhere else. So definitely check out the course material that we have and check out the course itself. It's online. If you can post the link here, that would be great.
Yes, I'll be sharing. And additionally, because today is the round one application deadline. So anybody who is wanting to avail a scholarship for the program, we highly recommend everyone to apply by today, because the chances of getting a scholarship in the second round is going to be relatively lower.
Right. We have more questions. Do you design for English and then work on translated screens? For this app, we had to sort of do a round in English and then see how, once we've converted that to the local language, see how that fits. Ideally, what you would do is you would actually try and start off with the local language. The reason we did it like this is because we needed to make it for more local languages. So, we had to start with English, right? Is there any scholarship? Yes, there is. As she just pointed out, you can actually see it online. How do you suggest to kickstart a journey in UI UX field? Also, what are your suggestions to keep up the consistency in the field of UI? The Kickstarter journey, well, just read, just start, get your hands on as much material as possible, and always be on the lookout for problem statements that you want to solve, right? Like, just be curious. That's what you'll need as a designer, a whole bunch of curiosity, right? And a willingness to learn, willingness to know when you don't know, and you are open to asking questions, and ask a lot of questions. Did engineering help you in any aspect? Yes, to a certain degree. I think the logical side of at least for me, the logical side of design comes from understanding how, because I was an electronics engineer, so I had to do a lot of workflows. So that made sense for me, when I translated the flow diagram that you have for an electrical circuit into a flow diagram that you have for a user flow. So that was a one-to-one for me in my head, at least. Bathman says, I'm an interior designer looking to transition. Is this an easy shift? How long does it take to be proficient on the job? And what's a good starting point? I wouldn't say, yes, it's a moderate shift, I think, because a lot of the creativity that you bring from interior design in terms of optimization of space, for example, or how you lay out an interior architecture, all of that knowledge does help you in learning the basics of design. But proficiency obviously comes with time, comes with learning, comes with looking up things online, reading design books, reading the basic design books for sure, like Design of Everyday Things or Design and Storytelling, those kind of books, of course, right? Good starting point, of course, again, like, just going online and checking out the basics of design. Nielsen Norman Group has a good set of articles on the basics of design. So does IDEO. They are both the grandfathers of design, so you should check them out. How many people were working in this particular project, and how do you divide the roles? We had, including myself, 4 people on this project. So there were 2 UX designers and 1 UI lead, and myself as the UX lead. Roles are divided based on the job roles, basically. So as a UX lead, I'm responsible for spearheading the ideation, the research, the strategy, workflow, all of that. The UI lead is responsible for the visual research, setting the baseline for the aesthetics, things like that. Senior UX designer comes in and actually creates the wireframes. Once I've set out the ideation, once I've set out the baseline workflow and the baseline wireframes. So, it comes with different roles are divided according to different hierarchies within the organization, at least for us. After high fidelity wireframe, was there any usability study done? If yes, what was the change done? Could you please showcase before and after design changes? After high fidelity wireframe, fortunately, we didn't have to do a usability study, mostly because the whole idea of having such an extensive user study from the get-go, or such an extensive research phase overall, was so that we understand exactly what is required. We did, however, do very niche usability studies in terms of A/B testing, how the news cards should look, in terms of actually we did do a small usability testing for the navigation as well, to see if what we've done actually works. So that was phase 2 of our user interviews and usability studying, was just creating a prototype of the high fidelity wireframe and just taking an overview of how we've done the design and if it makes sense to the user. Things changed a little bit, not too much. The kind of information that we've laid out and things like that, those did change. But again, it was I can't actually show you because I'll have to look through a whole bunch of files right now. But that's a good question. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. How did you get your first job in UX? Also, did you sit for your engineering placements? Yes, I did. It wasn't pleasant. I should have known then that I wasn't made for engineering, but that's a different story. I did get a good rank though. Like, I'm from Bitsranchi, so I made it all right, I think. But it was hell, man. How did you get your first job in UX? Well, I actually got an internship while I was doing my master's at NYU. And that sort of opened the door for my first job because I got converted from an intern to a designer at the same organization. And it was lucky enough that I was actually interning with my thesis mentor. So this was the person who was not only giving me an internship, he was also teaching me and telling me how to be a better designer, and overall just, always making sure that I was on the right track. So that's how I got my first job. And honestly, if not through that, I would recommend actually just looking at, like I said, like polishing up your basics for design and sort of ensuring that you start looking at real world problems and building out a real world portfolio, and just applying, like looking at places where you think you'd be the right fit and applying. Can we self-learn UI UX design? Absolutely. All of the designers are about 70% of the designers at one thing are self-taught designers. It's mostly, designers higher up who have actually learned this, because we started way earlier in the industry. So we actually went through the education route, but people coming in now are quite self-taught, in fact. How did you bring your contextual content across languages? We use translators. We The translator that you heard, along with an entire translation agency that we had to onboard as partners, they helped us sort of translate it. And what do you call, the clients themselves had a whole set of translators sitting there for this specific purpose. So they would again QC what we had done, and we would make sure that everything was, up to spiff.
Like you shared your entire experience. I think we are definitely looking up to you, especially if you want to make a career in user experience. Certainly, you've
That's
largely answered all the questions that popped up. So thank you so much for that. Any last minute thoughts? And particularly because today is the round one application deadline. So anything that you'd like to specify?
I mean, not much. I think whatever you saw here was just a fraction of, what actually goes into building a great product. And, what we are trying to do is actually give you that knowledge in a way that, it's applicable. Like, you can actually go out and uh, build real world products and, build real world experiences for actual users, rather than just theoretically looking at them in a book. So, I'm hoping that people who've gathered here today, I hope that, they join up and they become a part of this journey with me and with the rest of the One Thing Design crew, along with Masters Union. Oh, we have more. All right. Can I transition from graphic design to UI design? Where should I start? You can. We have graphic designers who are currently UI designers. Where do you start again? So you already have the basics of the creativity involved. Now you have to get to know how the logic works. So, read up on how to do user interviews, what user empathy is, how do products function, basics of design, basically, over and above the creative side of it, like, how to build an information architecture, how to prioritize users, things like that. What are some specializations in the field of UX UI? Great question. So you obviously have your UX designer, your UI designer, but you can become an information architect. That little slide you saw with like a bunch, like that flow chart that you saw, that's the information architecture, right? So you can become a specialist in just creating information architecture. You can become an information architect who does this for a living, only builds this physically or digitally for a living. You could also become a, discovery specialist, which is basically where you go into an organization and understand what their needs are and help them define the product that they are trying to build. Right. You can become a UX developer, which is when you become a design. If you know how to code, you just learn how to design and then you combine that. So then you have the end-to-end process sorted. Right. So you not only design, but you also know how it's supposed to translate onto a screen, because that's very important. People forget that sometimes. So yeah, you have a bunch of them online. You can in fact go into anything, any niche, any part of the process that you saw right now. Each of those things is its own specialization in UX. People just do user research, for example. I'm actually just a user researcher for the organization. The design work that I do is mostly just on paper, because I'm just trying to translate what I have studied in the research, right? any online courses you want to suggest to build a portfolio, ours. You can come in and we'll help you build a portfolio. But outside of that, you can look it up on Figma. The community is quite strong there. You will find a bunch of templates there to understand how portfolios are built. Can we have a Q&A with the moderator to understand selection process for Masters Union? That's a good one, Kevin. Why don't you take that up?
Sure. I think I really loved the last part to be the befitting ending that, this is the course where you can build the portfolio. Ideally, I'd like, but yes, definitely. So there are 3 stages, Kevin, that we're going to be taking primarily. One is the application stage. So definitely make it a point that you fill it by today, because today is the first round 1 application deadline, especially if you're looking for a scholarship, that is, because the scholarship portfolios, largely we're going to be taking it from the first round of applications itself. The second point, after your application has been filled, you're going to be getting a round or like a call for the interview. And the interview round largely is going to be trying to figure out, gauge whether the course is going to be an apt fitment for your career objective or not. It's not that we want a bunch of people who are just joining the course, but genuinely want to make a career in the UI UX experience or the UI UX domain altogether. Also, besides fitment, there will be, of course, a cultural fit and a skill fit review that they'll be doing. By cultural fit, just making sure whether or not you're going to be making an appropriate candidate. And there isn't any specific benchmarking per se, but of course they'll be gauging your overall career trajectory. So be very clear, have a proper understanding. I think just reflect a lot and then come for the interview call. That's pretty much about it. A lot of introspection. Be very candid about your expectations. Be very candid about your career growth or graph that you're looking at, because that is something that the Masters Union interview panel really takes it absolutely seriously. And that's like something which ideally we prefer and we recommend everyone to be as candid and make sure that you're ultimately sharing all those details with us. And finally, there will be a review analysis. Post that, the offer letter would be extended if you make it to the list. And remember, like we had Venky's webinar on Saturday as well, and Venky had said a beautiful line that this is a profession where you ideally do not require a great set of requirements to actually kickstart your career. But of course, the kind of support, the anchorage that you're going to be getting, that of course will be December over the course. But largely, correct me if I'm wrong, Venky, you had mentioned that, it's a very low bar in terms of there's no criteria per se that you have to be an engineer or you have to have a UI UX experience.
Absolutely. Like, you just need to be curious. You just need to, have a bit of common sense. That's literally what we sell. It's just common sense. Like, how do things work? That's it. Like, curiosity of why something works the way it does. That's about it. And you are a designer if you think that way. That's it.
Absolutely. And just like Venky had mentioned today, also make that problem statement clear, ask those relevant questions, make sure that you're starting with that. So of course, Kevin, and largely, I think if you have attended all the 3 webinars also that we've conducted, I'm sure you'll be able to like put a good foot forward in front of the interview panel. So you should be sorted, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Batman, for that wonderful compliment. I'm glad that you found the session insightful. If you find this session insightful, imagine 6 months worth of studying with us. So yeah, I'm hoping to see all of you during our MasterCamp.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Venky. And this is exactly the compliment that me and my colleague Weber were also giving you in the afternoon, that you're actually a repository of knowledge, especially when it comes to, the entire domain of UI UX, and such a great orator, both you and Antara. So I think we've learned a lot during the entire 3 webinars. So thank you so much for your time. And of course, any other concerns, if anyone's having, please feel free to reach out to the Masters Union admissions team. They'd be more than happy to help you out in the entire process. Thank you, Venky. Thanks everyone for joining us.